Hey Internet, it's Matt here for the Dork Lords. If you're new to the channel, welcome. We talk about all manner of dorkly things here, whether it's sci-fi, fantasy, superheroes. We probably have a playlist about it. Just talked about Captain Marvel yesterday. But today is another in our Dork Lord of the Rings segments. And today we're going to be talking about Grond, the battering ram from Return of the King. I was going to talk about it last week, but then that amazing news dropped from Amazon about their series, Second Age. Amazing. So, Grond got pushed back a week, but it is still very engaging, and thus, we talk about it now. All right. So, setting the scene. Return of the King. Minas Tirith is under siege. To break down the gates, Sauron / the Witch King bring out the big guns. Grond. Okay, and Grond is described in Return of the King thusly. Its hideous head, founded of black steel, was shaped in the likeness of a ravening wolf. On it, spells of ruin lay. Grond, they named it, in memory of the hammer of the Underworld of old. Great beasts drew it, orcs surrounded it, and behind walked mountain trolls to wield it. Okay, so Grond is essentially at least 100 feet long. It's a gigantic battering ram. This huge black steel wolf head on the front. And it also has, as I mentioned, spells of ruin lay on it. The aura of evil on Grond was so great that these beasts that were pulling Grond would occasionally just go mad from the innate evil pouring off this thing, go mad, just start rampaging and just, go run over their fellow soldiers even. And so it was, I'm sure there was like a little musical chairs. Let's find someone who won't go crazy and have them pull for a while. Great. So it's a very, dangerous, powerful item. And when it finally is pulled up to the gates, it only takes a few hits to demolish the gates of Minas Tirith. And again, here's a little description of it in the book. It says, "Thrice the great ram boomed, and suddenly, upon the last stroke, the gate of Gondor broke. As if stricken by some blasting spell, it burst asunder. There was a blast of searing lightning, and the doors tumbled in riven fragments to the ground." So you get that searing lightning effect. That makes it, again, sound like it's more than just brute force, right? This is something with spells on it to take out obstacles. Very, very powerful relic. Why is it called Grond? It mentions there in that first passage I read, it says, "in memory of the hammer of the Underworld of old." All right, so Grond is, in fact, Hammer of the Underworld sounds like an awesome, I'll just take that. That's just a great name, Hammer of the Underworld. But the Hammer of the Underworld was a weapon used by Morgoth. Okay, and we only hear about it, I believe, one time, but it's a doozy. It's really, really cool. It actually refers to arguably the greatest duel in Tolkien history. All right, so let me set the scene for you real fast. Okay, it's in the First Age. The elves have laid siege to Morgoth in his fortress at Angband. And they've laid siege there for hundreds of years. They've kept him at bay. However, interestingly and importantly, the Valar, the angels of Tolkien's world, have stated that no elf can totally defeat Morgoth. Maybe it's not so much of a prophecy, it's just a statement of fact. Like, he's just incredibly powerful, and there's not an elf that can just take him on and kill him. So they can't kill him, but they can keep him at bay, and that's what they do for a long, long, long time. Well, meanwhile, Morgoth in secret is creating an army, gathering forces behind his walls, and in this one particular moment, it's the day called Dagor Bragollach, he unleashes first rivers of fire, essentially a volcano, a volcanic eruption followed by hordes of monsters. And so he overruns the elves that are laying siege to him and the surrounding lands. So one of the elven kings that's affected by this is an elven king named Fingolfin. And his land is actually spared more than most because of just natural barriers, mountains and such, that keep his lands from being totally, taken over by lava. But still, he suffers great losses. Morgoth is now, back in control, and a lot of his elven kin have died. Now, Fingolfin, I should just say this up front. In terms of elite warriors, let's say you're picking a team. I want to pick the team of elite elven warriors, and I have anyone to choose from in the Tolkien mythos. He's got to be high on your list. Okay, this guy, sure, Glorfindel, there's Fëanor, there's Ecthelion of the Fountain, not Ecthelion the human, but Ecthelion the elf, who sacrificed himself to kill the Lord of Balrog's Guthmog. But I would argue, I think if I'm picking teams, I think I pick this guy, Fingolfin. Not just because he's an amazing warrior, which he is, but he's very confident, as you will see. He's got some swagger to him. All right, so he sees all this devastation. Horrible things are happening. His idea is, I can fix this. I'll just ride to Angband and challenge Morgoth to a one-on-one duel. And so that's what he does. Now, I'll mention this. It's somewhat parallel. I was just talking about Yarnur, the king of Gondor, who the Witch King called him out, right? The Witch King called him out and said, hey, I challenge you to a duel. Yarnur rode off to Angmar and was never seen again. So this is somewhat like that, although there are some differences. One big difference is that, as you'll see in a second, Tolkien describes the duel between Fingolfin and Morgoth in great detail. It's an amazing duel. Whereas with Yarnur and the Witch King, he doesn't write anything about it. So, in my opinion, Yarnur rode to Angmar, and the Witch King was like, yeah, I have no honor. Kill him, men! And he was out. In this case, the duel actually did take place, and Tolkien wrote about it. The other thing is, Morgoth didn't taunt Fingolfin. Fingolfin taunts Morgoth. So in this case, the hero taunts the villain. Okay, but in some ways, unfortunately, it's the same result. Good guys kind of losing this. But all right, Fingolfin rides to Angband. Now, on the way, he's got to travel through enemy territory. But he is so intimidating, and he's so grim-faced, and he just looks, dare I say, badass, that the foes just all part for him. No one stops him. All the orcs are like, okay, you can go by. You don't need the password. Fingolfin rides to Angband. At the gates, starts taunting Morgoth, demanding he come out for a battle. Morgoth actually is a little intimidated himself. He feels a little like, I don't really want to do this. There's no need for me to do this. I'm in control. I don't want to risk anything. But these taunts must have been very personal, I guess, because it works. Finally, Morgoth's like, all right, my ego tells me I need to go handle this, or I lose face in front of my soldiers. So the taunts eventually lure Morgoth into this one-on-one fight. Now, to get ready for this fight, Morgoth puts on his black armor, and he pulls out this weapon that we haven't heard from. When he attacks, for instance, the trees of Arda, when he destroys them with Ungoliant. Check out my Ungoliant video. He uses a spear, right? So this is the one time where he's like, all right, I need to really bear down. So he takes the hammer of the Underworld, Grond. Now, Grond, I believe, is actually a mace, but it's called the hammer of the Underworld. There's a little dissension about whether it's a mace or a hammer, but I think it's fairly clearly stated to be a mace in the Silmarillion. So, in any case, it's a big old bludgeoning tool. Comes out, and again, there's a size difference. Morgoth is significantly bigger than Fingolfin. Fingolfin is using his sword, Ringil. Ringil, we know that it glitters like ice. So anyway, it's a magical sword, and we don't know what happened to Ringil after this particular fight, unfortunately. It disappears to history. But Morgoth starts just trying to bash Fingol's brains in. And I'll read a little short passage from Tolkien's description of this battle. Then Morgoth hurled aloft Grond, the hammer of the Underworld, and swung it down like a bolt of thunder. But Fingolfin sprang aside, and Grond rent a mighty pit in the earth, whence smoke and fire darted. Okay, so Morgoth is trying to bash Fingolfin, and he's creating these craters in the earth. That's how big this thing is. It's like, these aren't just little potholes. These are like things that a person could fall into. So bash, 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 and Fingolfin's dodging, and is counterattacking, essentially. I don't know if this is a weird analogy, but I remember back in the day playing Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. There was like the first minute and a half of Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. If you get hit one time, you're out. So you had to just dodge the whole time and then try to get hits in when you could. So that's kind of the way I foresee this Fingolfin thing's working out. In any case, he's dodging, he's hitting, and he wounds Morgoth 7 times. So he's he's getting the job done. Morgoth is on his heels for sure and taking damage. Both individuals are getting weary with the fight. There's these craters all over the place. The craters are actually filling up with Morgoth's blood. It's a madhouse scene. You can just imagine these like goosh, big crater, and then cut. So eventually, unfortunately, Fingolfin starts to see weary, and he gets knocked down a couple of times. And at one point, he falls into one of those craters. So he slips, and he's like, and he falls into one of these craters made by Grond, and Morgoth steps on him. Again, he's so huge. He steps on him and essentially breaks Fingolfin's neck by stepping on him. But in his death throes, Fingolfin has one last attack, and with Ringil, he slashes Morgoth's heel. And accordingly, basically Morgoth walks with a limp for the rest of his days on Middle-earth. He's around, and he gets cast into the void eventually, but he's around for another 100+ years. During that whole time, he walks with a limp because of this fight, and apparently it gives him constant pain. So he has this incredibly painful reminder of this fight, not to mention the wounds he got from 7 slashes with this sword. But the thing on his heel, I actually didn't, before I researched this, I didn't realize he walked with a limp for that long, but he did. As an end result of this, the elves, they don't even have a song. Usually they would have a song for a battle of this magnitude, but they don't sing about this because it causes them too much sadness to dwell on the death of Fingolfin in this way. And likewise, the orcs of Angband don't create a boasting celebration song about this because their master took a beating. And I think maybe perhaps they even felt like, hey, if we start singing about this, he might remember that he's in pain and come over and bash us good. So let's just let sleeping dogs lie. Yay, we won. So even the orcs don't even sing about this battle. That's how poorly Morgoth came off in this whole thing. So anyway, that was the one instance of Grond, the mace, the hammer of the underworld, being used in battle. So that leads to the obvious question of, hey, if the battering ram is named after Grond, why does it have a wolf head on it? Good question. So the wolf head is actually an homage to one of Morgoth's more famous servants, and that would be Carcharoth. Carcharoth was the greatest, strongest, most powerful wolf in Tolkien's history. Was of the brood of Draugluin, the first werewolf ever in Tolkien's mythos. Morgoth trained Carcharoth, raised him, and he became the guardian of Angband. Kind of like a Cerberus guarding Hades, except he didn't have 3 heads. So this Grond, I guess because it's also the mace was associated with Morgoth, so was the wolf's head associated with Morgoth. Interestingly, Peter Jackson in the movie, I'll put a picture up, but essentially there's, his version of Grond has fire in the mouth. And I don't think that's stated in the books. But I like this interpretation. I think it could mean a couple of things. One, perhaps he's referring to the fact that Carcharoth is translated to Red Maw. And as he was called, the Red Maw. I always assumed that Red Maw meant red like in blood, like he was, chomping on folks. But perhaps Red Maw could also mean fire. And there are depictions of Carcharoth that I've seen in drawings that depict him breathing fire. I don't know that that's an actual thing. You can tell me in the comments, but perhaps that fire is a reference to the nickname of Carcharoth, the Red Maw. The other thing might be an homage to the most famous thing that Carcharoth ever did, the ill-advised move of biting off Beren, the famous Beren of Beren and Luthien, Beren's hand, that hand clutching a Silmaril gem. When Carcharoth ingested hand and gem, the gem burned him from the inside out. And so that burning drove him mad with pain, and he went on just a rampage, a wild rampage. So perhaps that fire is suggesting, the Carcharoth we know that was driven mad with pain and, was a very destructive force as a result of it. So if you're going to harken back to a destructive force, perhaps Carcharoth having swallowed a Silmaril might be a reasonable thing to pay homage to. Anyway, so just an interesting little note there of perhaps what Peter Jackson was thinking when he designed the idea of Carcharoth with a fiery mouth. When I say Carcharoth, I mean Grond with Carcharoth's head. So there you go. That is Grond, the battering ram, and the mace, the hammer of the underworld. And so I think it's a pretty cool little bit of combining first age with third age stuff, and Morgoth with Sauron. So in any case, if you've got any concepts or ideas that you'd like me to chat about, put them in the comments. I'd be happy to do a video about a topic of your choosing. Thanks so much, everybody, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.